Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to utilize ChatGPT for cybersecurity. So I'm going to start off by explaining what it is, because a lot of you have asked me about it, and sort of giving you examples of how it can be used both on the red team side of cybersecurity as well as the blue team side. And of course, we'll be discussing my haircut in the comment section, but let's get started. So I'm just going to give you a very brief introduction in the form of slides because I think that's most appropriate. So why am I making this video? Well, firstly, as you already know, ChatGPT has received a lot of attention from the technology industry and specifically the cybersecurity industry. And this is something that took OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, by surprise, given the fact that cybersecurity professionals were quick to jump on ChatGPT and test it, and we've discovered a lot of crazy things that can be done. So the main objective here is to show you how to use it. Is very, very simple, and then of course show you what it's capable of at a very basic level. Of course, I'm encouraging you to try it out for yourself. So there have been a lot of questions surrounding the impact, the effects that ChatGPT will have on cybersecurity, the cybersecurity industry and practitioners. So that's one of the second reasons why I'm making this video. Is I've gotten a lot of private messages asking me, well, ChatGPT is cool, but what impact will this have? Not just through ChatGPT, but generally speaking, what impact will AI have on cybersecurity, and will this affect cybersecurity jobs, so on and so forth. And the other reason, of course, is it's an invaluable tool or resource that can be used to improve your KSAs, that is knowledge, skills, and abilities in a particular field within cybersecurity, but not limited to cybersecurity, as you'll see. And finally, of course, it's a game changer, in my opinion. Now, the main question is, why have I taken this long to make a video on ChatGPT? Well, the reason for that is, firstly, I wanted to try it out for myself and also think quite deeply about the second point here, which is a question, and that is, how will this affect cybersecurity in the long term? All right, and I'll be answering that towards the end of the video. So lots of reasons, and I wanted to take my time and sort of understand it, get an idea of what it can and can't do, what are its benefits, and of course limitations. So that begs the question, what is ChatGPT? Well, ChatGPT is an AI-driven chatbot launched by OpenAI in November 2022. It is trained using reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is a learning technique. And of course, that the abbreviation for that is RLHF, which I'll touch upon. And it's built on top of OpenAI's GPT 3.5 family of large language models and is fine-tuned with both supervised and reinforced learning techniques. And you can get started with ChatGPT by visiting the following link. It is currently free at the moment because it's still in the preview mode, and I'll explain what that means, but you'll actually learn a lot about this shortly. So that's essentially an intro to ChatGPT. Now, the best way to show you this is to actually give you a demo. So I'm going to switch over to my browser and we can get started. All right, so I'm currently on the OpenAI website, and the reason I want to start off here is because this is your starting point. So you'll need to create an account. It's free, and then you'll have access to ChatGPT or the chatbot itself, which is accessible under chat.openai.com. But before that, we need to understand a few things. So right on the website, we have a brief description. So you can see ChatGPT optimizing language models for dialogue. So we've trained a model called ChatGPT, which interacts in a conversational way. That's very important. One of the great things that a lot of people have liked about ChatGPT and really underutilized is its conversational method of interacting with you, or with you interacting with it. So what this means is that the dialogue format makes it possible for ChatGPT to answer follow-up questions, which is something, again, that you should take advantage of. Admit its mistakes, challenge incorrect premises, and reject inappropriate requests. So in addition to just giving you answers and you responding in, let's say, a way that it expects, sort of asking a follow-up question, you can also, essentially tell the actual chatbot that, hey, this doesn't look correct. And, the response obviously will either be to cross-verify that, or to tell you, this is where it's limited, so on and so forth. So ChatGPT is a sibling model to InstructGPT, which is trained to follow an instruction prompt and provide a detailed response. And of course, you can scroll down right over here, and they essentially go over some of its strengths and weaknesses. And at the moment, you can see it's free during the research preview stage. And this is a tool that obviously is going to be priced or is going to be behind a paywall. And you'll see why in a couple of seconds. So you can see that they give a couple of examples here, specifically for developers, where you can put in a code snippet or a chunk of code and say, this code is not working like I expect. How do I fix it? All right. So there's 2 questions in that one statement, and it's a very detailed, specific question. And the user pastes in the snippet of code. And you can see the response from ChatGPT is, it tells you it's difficult to say what's wrong with the code without more context. So this is something that's very, very important for bespoke questions or very nuanced questions. You will be required to provide context, and that is something that you need to be acutely aware of. Anyway, you can see that ChatGPT responds, and the user says the error never surfaces. I think there's something wrong with the channel. So, there's essentially a conversation there, so on and so forth, and they go ahead and explain the method. So this is where we have the reinforcement learning from human feedback technique. And this is the same technique used, or the same method that's used within InstructGPT, with slight differences in the data collection setup. So they've trained the initial model using a supervised fine-tuning human AI trainers, provided conversations in which they played both sides, the user and the AI assistant. We gave the trainers access to model written suggestions to help them compose their responses. We mixed this new dialogue dataset with the InstructGPT dataset, so on and so forth. So they actually explain this entire process, which I recommend you go through. And of course, they outline the limitations. So I'll specifically talk about one of the limitations here, and this one right over here. So the model is often excessively verbose and overuses certain phrases, such as restating that it's a language model trained by OpenAI, so on and so forth, and you'll actually see that. So and then finally, of course, it's an iterative deployment, so do take note of that. And you can actually go through their website. Now, to get started, you can see I've signed in, and this is the interface, fundamentally speaking. So you can see that you have their Discord server at the bottom here, and you can switch to a light mode or a dark mode, and you can, check the latest updates and the FAQ pages, and you can log out, and you can create new chats here. So I'm currently interacting with it here, and it gives you very useful starting points. So you have examples, capabilities, and limitations. And we're going to be taking a look at a couple of examples, both on the red team side and the blue team side of things. So just keep that in mind, and you'll actually see how powerful this is. So to get started, how does this work? Well, you essentially ask it a question. All right, that's very, very simple. You just say, so I can ask, for example, what is red teaming? Very simple question, right? And this is how it'll respond. So it'll say red teaming is a method, of evaluating the strengths and weaknesses of a plan, organization, or system by simulating the actions of an adversary. We can then, ask it a follow-up question. This is not really a good example, but I'll show you what that looks like. So you ask it a question, and it gives you a definition. Now, one of the issues that I have, especially for researchers, is this definition, of course, does not, it doesn't tell you where it's obtained the definition. Of course, there's multiple sources behind the dataset, but it doesn't give you the actual sources. So for researchers, this will sort of give you a very succinct explanation, which you can then derive from and then perform further research. But, you ask it a question, and, it then gives you a response based on what you asked it. So in this case, I can say, for example, what is 9 times 11? Sorry, what is 9 times 11? I can ask it that way and say that is incorrect. All right, that's sort of the responses that you can give. So You can see I told it that it's incorrect. Now, of course, I know it's correct, but it tells you right over here, I apologize for the mistake. The correct answer is 99. Please let me know if you have any other questions. So this is one of the important things that I wanted to touch upon, is that you can have a dialectic, discussion or dialogic discussion with the actual chatbot. And it's very intelligent. Now, of course, I've used very stupid examples, but you also have the ability to modify your questions. And more importantly, you can also start a new chat. So I'm just going to delete this one here, because if you take a look at this here, it remembers what the user said early in the conversation. So for different topics and contexts, I'm just going to create a new chat like we have over here. So I'll give you a simple example of what a cybersecurity student or practitioner may ask ChatGPT. So for example, I can say, let's try and change it. We can say, how can I scan for SMB vulnerabilities with Nmap? It's a very, I wouldn't say it's a very specific question, but we're asking it a question that's loaded with context. And what am I saying when I say this? Well, we've mentioned a tool, we've mentioned a specific technology, SMB, and this is in the context of both offensive and defensive security. But I can say, I can ask the question here. Now, this is one of the issues with its verbosity, in that it gives you a definition of Nmap, which is very, very helpful. But you can see that right over here, it gives you the definition of what Nmap is, and then it says to scan for SMB vulnerabilities with Nmap, you can use the following command, and it actually gives you the actual code snippet here. So Nmap, you limit the scan to port 445, and then you specify the script option, and then you specify the SMB vulnerability scripts, but you use the wildcard flag right over here, or the wildcard option, to specify that you want to use all Nmap scripts, and then specify the target, right? And then it gives you a follow-up explanation, which is awesome. So it tells you that this will scan the target host for a network. This will scan the target host on network for SMB vulnerabilities. And then it explains what each of the options and flags do. And then it says, right, you can also use the A option to enable OS detection and version scanning, so on and so forth. So I mean, this is absolutely incredible. If you think, if I think about it from when I was a student or when I was getting into cybersecurity, this is an invaluable resource. Now, why am I saying this? You might be saying, well, there's resources online that you can find via Google, and that's true. However, to be able to ask a question like this with a very basic, I would say, grammar, or maybe I didn't structure it correctly, but I had enough context, and for this explanation, for this question to be answered with such a, really well written explanation and examples of code snippets, as well as the actual explanation of what the command does, is absolutely fantastic. So that's a very basic example. Now, we can try out a couple of other examples. So for example, I can say, generate a PHP reverse shell one-liner. Now this is, you may be asking yourself, can it do this? Well, of course. So it gives you the definition of what a reverse shell is, and then absolutely incredible, it provides you with a PHP reverse shell one-liner and explains how it works, fundamentally speaking. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Now, follow-up question that I could ask is, encode the code above, and then right over here, it tells us, to encode the PHP reverse shell one-liner, you can use a tool such as base64. So we didn't provide it with context with regards to how we want to encode it, but we can ask follow-up questions, and this is absolutely phenomenal. So it encodes it in base64, and you can see this will output the encoded version right over here. That's how to generate it as a one-liner base64 string, and to decode it, it gives you instructions on how to decode it. So absolutely phenomenal. So these are just a couple of examples. Now I can even go a bit further with this. I can say, for example, let's try something a bit more nuanced. So I can say, how can I fuzz? Sorry, let me type that in correctly. How can I fuzz for XML files with GoBuster? And let me make sure you guys can see this, but there we are. You can see how can I fuzz for XML files with GoBuster. there we are. So it gives you a definition of what GoBuster is. And, you know, this is absolutely incredible. So it actually explains really everything about that particular command. And it then gives you an example. And I can show you another follow-up that you can ask it, as, you know, as we are curious pen testers, really. You know, we could maybe say, all right, so let's see if this will work. So I can say, we can say fuzz. How can I'll just write it here. So using the above code, how can I also limit GoBuster to fuzz for PHP files that return a, let's see, this is actually quite difficult, return a, not difficult, you know, very simple to understand, but let's say return a 200 status code. Let's see if this actually works. This is, you know, there we are. It actually works. So it tells us how to limit, you know, files that were found that return a 200, an HTTP 200 status code. So, I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Now, of course, we're taking a look at red team examples, and I'll go through a couple more just to show you how robust this is. And, you know, again, the same question may be asked, you know, wouldn't this be easier to search for directly on Google? And the answer is yes, you can search for the same thing. However, I don't think Google can answer this question as specifically as ChatGPT has. So for sure, once the research preview is ended, they are going to put this behind a paywall. I definitely deserves that. I mean, I'd be happy to pay for this. I found tremendous use. I found this extremely useful when doing research, so on and so forth. But, you know, that's just a very basic example that you can do. Now, you may be asking, is it just limited to commands? Can we generate some code? Of course we can. So I can say generate a shellcode that executes cmd.exe. So let's say you want to generate some shellcode. All right, it explains what's shellcode. It explains what shellcode is, and then it gives you some sample shellcode that will execute command.exe. All right, there we are. So just wait for it to complete generating. Of course, it doesn't format it correctly, but you get that there. Now, of course, another thing that I need to state, and you'll see this shortly, is based on the actual policies and guidelines, you can really, you know, interact with ChatGPT in a way that may produce results or information that could be used for illegal activity. So I can say, you know, generate a phishing email, and you'll see the response here. So once it's done with this particular question or query, if you will, I can say generate a phishing email. There we are. So it tells us right over here, this content may violate our content policy. And what we can do then, let's say, you know, we don't want to generate a phishing email. It's too abstract anyway, but let's say we're trying to generate a very well-written email. So we can, for example, say, let's see, I can say write an email informing employees of, sorry, let me type that in, informing employees of end of year bonuses. Let's say we want to perform, you know, phishing campaign. We want to generate a very well written email. You can see it actually does that for you. So, I mean, this is absolutely insane, even more insane than my haircut. So anyway, getting back to this, but, you know, it actually highlights areas of substitution. But there we are, dear all. I am pleased to announce that our company will be offering end-of-year bonuses to all employees. And of course, you can modify this and say, click on the following Excel or click on the following document and sign it, so on and so forth. And, you know, that particular document could contain a macro. Speaking of macros, can we generate a macro? Let's try that. So we can say, generate a macro that executes, and I'm sticking to cmd.exe for simplicity here, that executes cmd.exe. All right, so it explains what macros are in the context of Office or the Office suite. And it actually generates that macro. So yeah, this is absolutely insane. And then, I can ask it a follow-up question. On the above code, modify the above code to execute a PowerShell script. I know this is quite stupid, but I can ask it to do this. You can see that the only thing substituted would be, specifying the path to the actual PowerShell script. But I mean, absolutely phenomenal. I don't know whether you guys can see how excited I am. And this is like insane. To have this type of resource available is, I mean, I can't even believe that I'm seeing this. Whatever we're doing is, some buff overflows, which I'll be covering on the channel. But we can say C code vulnerable to buffer overflows. Very simple question, explains what a buffer overflow is. And there we go. Generates the C code, and then it'll let's see if it actually provides an explanation. There we are, as to why it is vulnerable. So this can be seen as both useful from the perspective of a red teamer and blue teamer. But you can see there we are, it actually explains that. And we can say fix the above code. If I can type correctly today. There we are. And it'll actually show you how to fix the buffer overflow vulnerability. This is mind-boggling, guys. And of course, I would love to hear what your thoughts are in the comment section. Now, I'll be making follow-up videos on ChatGPT because there's tons of resources. The desktop applications, the browser extensions, plugins for tools like IDA that have been released. I'll be covering them and how they can sort of be utilized to streamline your operations. But these are sort of the examples. Now, I'll touch on a couple of other examples for red teamers, and then I'll show you some blue team examples. So another one maybe could be, generate a bash script, and this is really cool, and I'll show you why. Bash script to that that automates port scanning with Nmap. All right. I mean, it actually provides documentation. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Now, of course, this is something that you need to verify. You can't just take this and run it in the case of more complex pieces of code, but it also tells you how to execute it. Just absolutely insane. Hope you guys are excited as I am. So that's very simple, but we can also do a bit of chaining here. So in addition to that, I can say I need a bash script that automates subdomain enumeration with a tool with, we can say, sublister, and takes screenshots with eyewitness. This is more so for those of you who are bug bounty hunters. It actually generates it, and it looks like it gives us that warning here. But with regards to context, I mean, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I mean, honestly, I don't know whether you guys can. This is absolutely insane. So you can see it, prompts the user for the for the target domain, and then enumerates it with with sublist, or automates the process and outputs it into a text file, and then utilizes eyewitness to take screenshots. And yeah, just absolutely insane. Now, another cool example that I'd seen recently on Twitter is we can say generate a CTF challenge that contains an SQL injection vulnerability. Okay. Oh, all right. Okay. All right. Yeah, so we got the error there. It doesn't look like it works anymore, but I'll show you something really interesting in a second. So we've taken a look at some really interesting red team examples. I'll touch upon blue team. So let's take a look at that now. All right, so I have created a new chat here. So for blue team, how can this be used? Well, let's take some tools that you typically utilize. So for example, we can say, let's say we're trying to learn how to write a search query to identify changes in Windows registry, right? On the Windows registry from the logs that are and events that are being sent to ELK. So you can say ELK query to detect registry changes. Okay, gives you an intro to the Elastic, or rather the ELK stack. And then I hope you guys are seeing this, but there we are. Here we are. So event ID of 13 and absolutely insane. So you can actually use this. A couple of examples are, regex, or we can just say regular expression, filter IP addresses in Splunk, let's say. All right, it explains what regular expression is. And of course, the code, or rather the regular expression you can use to filter an IP address in Splunk. And now for the final example, in this case, I'll use my own piece of code. I'm going to paste in a piece of code here, PHP code that is vulnerable to SQL injection because of a lack of input sanitization. And I'm going to show you that it can actually identify the issue again without, if we had asked ChatGPT to give us an example of PHP code that was vulnerable to SQL injection, you might be thinking to yourself, well, it's going to very easily do that. But let's provide our own code and let's see how smart it is at detecting that. All right, so I've just brought up a piece of PHP code that is vulnerable to SQL injection. So I can, in this case, I can say, what's wrong with this PHP code? Very simple, right? And I paste in the snippet there. And it tells us that there's a few potential issues with the PHP code. So it says the argv array is used to pass command line arguments to a PHP script. This is correct. And then, of course, the second point here, the get array is used to pass data to a PHP script through the URL query string. But it is not safe to use user-provided it's not safe to use user-provided data directly in a SQL query. An attacker could manipulate the ID parameter in the URL to form an injection attack, which could allow them to execute arbitrary SQL statements and potentially compromise the database. To fix these issues, you could consider the following: wrap the code that passes, so on and so forth, the following, and then the if statement itself, and then use prepared statements. And, it actually gives us an example of how we can modify the code to address these issues. So think about this from the perspective of a blue team or even a web developer or a developer in general. You can easily identify issues in your code if you're new to development, or if you're trying to find vulnerabilities in your code. And I mean, yeah, it's incredible. And of course, I've just shown you some very, very basic examples here. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through some more examples because I think you guys get the gist of what I'm saying here. Of course, I recommend trying it out yourself. And I'm just going to clear my conversations here. But now coming to the question, one of the actual incentives for making this video, and that was, how will this affect cybersecurity, the industry in general, and of course, practitioners? And from the questions I received, it seemed that there was sort of a negative connotation associated or attached to the question, which makes sense because a lot of people are saying, well, if, a chatbot, a natural language processing chatbot can do this and has enough context to answer these types of questions, doesn't that sort of make, in a way, penetration testers or cybersecurity practitioners redundant in a way? And of course, the answer to that is of course not, right? In the case of ChatGPT. But the question was widely asking the impacts of AI on cybersecurity. And of course, based on what we've seen here, it's very clear to me after thinking about it long and hard, having practiced in the cybersecurity industry for a long time, after having developed training material, and I essentially understand a lot about instructional design with regards to cybersecurity and how to assess the knowledge, skills, and abilities of, let's say, a pen tester, right? And based on what I've seen here, it's very clear that ChatGPT is not going to, is not going to get anyone, is not going to kick anyone out of a job in cybersecurity. Instead, it is going to enhance their knowledge and skills with regards to whatever they're doing, whether they're a pen tester or a blue teamer or even a developer, as I pointed out. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, NIST and the NIST NICE framework utilizes knowledge, skills, and abilities to essentially categorize or break down a person's, let's call it, a person's ability to do something, or their readiness. I really can't explain it in very simply, but it essentially assesses and determines, as it says right over here, who the best applicants are when several candidates qualify for a job. All right, so it's known as the Knowledge, Skills, and Abilities Framework. It's widely used and it's very, very important. As I said, the NIST NICE framework is adopted by many governments, companies, as well as intelligence units, so on and so forth. It's adopted by a lot of organizations for various reasons, because again, as I said, it determines who the best applicants are when several candidates qualify for a job. The knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary for the successful performance of a position are contained on each job vacancy announcement. So, it's broken down into knowledge, skills, and abilities. So knowledge consists of the subjects, topics, and items of information that an employee should know at the time he or she is hired or moved into the job. Let's just disregard this here. All right. So knowledge is essentially referring to your theoretical understanding of the field that you're working in. When I say theoretical, I mean understanding of what your role consists of at a high level. So sort of understanding the elements that make up, your job, and understanding them theoretically very well. Skills refer to the technical or manual proficiencies, which are usually learned or acquired through training or through application or empirical actions. So this is where you now, none of these precedes the other, but you'll typically start off with knowledge. So, you have your skills now. And this is where you're able to now take information, which is what we did with ChatGPT, where you can ask it a question, you get knowledge regarding a particular topic. And I'm speaking very micro now. I can ask it what is adversary emulation. It tells me what adversary emulation is. I can ask it some follow-up questions. But at the end of the day, I still need to go and do that out manually. Okay, and that's where skills come into play. So with regards to how ChatGPT will impact or affect cybersecurity, I think that it will greatly, incredibly improve knowledge, the knowledge of the next generation and the current generation of cybersecurity professionals, because you'll be able to, again, get answers to your questions very, very quickly, very efficiently, and you'll essentially improve or better your understanding of whatever you're doing or you're trying to learn or whatever you're practicing. And of course, this applies to not just students, but practitioners, cybersecurity practitioners, people who work in jobs. As I give you an example with the ELK query example, where, if you're someone working in a blue team and you're having a bit of issues, you can sort of offload a bit of the problem solving to ChatGPT, or help it make you understand what you need to do from a fundamental level. And this is where, as an individual, you can then assess your gaps in knowledge. So if you're having a tough time with writing ELK queries and you utilize ChatGPT, you can essentially say, okay, I clearly don't understand this enough. Can you help me get started with learning regular expressions, how to write regular expressions? Then you move on from there. But at the end of the day, this would still need to be done manually. So you then have abilities, right? Abilities present demonstrable capacity to apply several knowledge and skills simultaneously in order to complete a task or perform an observable behavior. So this is referring now to your actual job, right? Skills is really talking about, technical or manual proficiencies, and highlight your ability to do things. I don't want to use the word ability, but highlights your competency with regards to performing what falls under your actual job role and your responsibilities. And then abilities present demonstrable capacity to apply several knowledge and skills simultaneously. So sort of the intersection of all of the elements that make up your job role. So if you think of a blue teamer, abilities is where you have the ability to detect threats, perform correlation, perform incident handling, incident response, so on and so forth. So as I said, the reason why I use this is to sort of break that down. Of course, I've rambled on for a long enough time, but I think that ChatGPT will greatly improve this aspect here, knowledge, and it'll make people much more efficient with regards to what they're doing, and will make learning much more efficient. Now, as I said, this area here is something that, again, will not change, at least in my opinion, unless AI systems actually start doing this themselves. But even with that being done, it would still need manual verification because, again, it's very difficult to, at least in the short term, assign some form of responsibility to a system to essentially, for example, find vulnerabilities in code, fix them without breaking, let's say, a web application. But at a very basic level, they can do that at the moment. But these two, I think, here is where humans will still be required, obviously. But with regards to knowledge, you can obviously see that it's sort of, it's absolutely amazing. And that's essentially what I wanted to point across. Instead of looking at ChatGPT as a threat to you and, your skills or whatever, because even when I tried this, I was like, wow, this is, wow, you can ask any question you had, really, taking into account all of the limitations. You can ask it, anything you had, and it's much faster than a Google search, much faster than watching a video, which is a bit scary to say, but this is one of the reasons why I focus on this framework, because in my videos, I try and cover all of this, right? And of course, abilities now come through repetitive action and having an understanding of different aspects of, in our case, cybersecurity. But I touch upon knowledge, so I explain things to begin with, and then I go over the skills, so how to use a tool, so on and so forth. This is what you do in this case, on etc., etc. And then abilities is taking into account maybe 1 to 10 videos that combine a lot of things together and put it, or give you an actionable skill, if I can use that word without, contradicting myself. So ChatGPT is your friend. It is an incredible resource that I wish I had when I was getting started. And, I'd like to hear what you guys think of this. And of course, now to end off this particular presentation, I just want to, go over a few issues which you should be aware of. And I've already highlighted one of them, and that is that there are no sources displayed in the context of research. Information may not be accurate, so always validate your results. And this is where I say never rely on ChatGPT alone, at least at this point in time. And of course, because it is it is an AI system, based on the current preview, learning has ended. So it's currently working with its current data set and is not learning anything new. So keep that in mind. And of course, some pro tips from my end is always be specific, provide context, and do not rely on ChatGPT for everything. With that being said, thank you very much for watching this video. If you found value in it, please leave a like and share it. Furthermore, I will be covering ChatGPT more because I think there's a lot to touch upon, and specifically, showing you various resources that can be used to integrate ChatGPT, or you can integrate ChatGPT with to, streamline your operations, whether you're in the red team or blue team. But I would love to hear what you guys think, and really looking forward to the discussion that we'll have in the comment section. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. I just want to take a couple of moments to thank our Patreons. Thank you, Michael Hubbard, Dustin Umpress, Jerry Speds, Doozy, Sid Saab, Ryan Carr, Shamir Douglas, Jojo Bibi, Palangos, Kush Kev, RS, Nino Buikov, and David Bricker. You guys are really awesome. Thank you very much for supporting us, and you guys make these types of videos possible. So we really appreciate it, and we look forward to producing even more high quality content.